All right, we're live. Welcome, 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 welcome. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to MSP Tutor, the show where we teach MSPs something useful. I'm Steve Taylor, your host. Today I'm joined by Dean from Helpt and Crab Company. Crab Consulting, my bad. I see CO and I think company. All right, so Dean, talk to me, man. You have a very bold claim here that you helped scale an MSP from 700,000 to 50 million in annual revenue.
Yep.
All right.
All by myself. I did all the work. No one else helped.
Yeah, that's typically how that works. Yeah, you don't rely on anybody else. And you just do it all yourself, and that's how things scale best, is when you don't bring others in and you just do it all yourself.
And honestly, if you don't want to sit through this whole presentation, you know what it was. We had a lot of opportunities where luck happened to chance across our door, and because we had prepared ourselves, we were able to action on that luck, and we kind of stumbled upwards into success. So that's the TLDW. Didn't watch.
Yeah. So I think that's honestly how most businesses do it. I mean, I would say 50% of it is talent and skill, and 50% of it is luck. And I'm pretty sure that's like a Linkin Park lyric or something. But anyway, so let's talk about hold on. So I've got people asking me why we're not live. We are live. The people who are looking at LinkedIn going, why isn't it live? It's because I accidentally scheduled it for 11 p.m. and then I deleted that one. Yeah. So go to the right one if you're watching the wrong one. How about that? All right. So with that said, today we're going to talk about scaling your MSP. So I have a bunch of questions, but I think you've also got some slides that you wanted to go through. It's not a lot of slides, like 40 or 50, right?
It's less than 200 slides.
Okay.
And it's only text, so make sure that you have something to write down notes. There's going to be very little discussion. I'm just going to read the slides.
Okay, perfect. I love this first slide, by the way.
Well, I'm a huge Futurama fan, if everybody hasn't figured that out yet. So Dr. Zoidberg was abused throughout this slide deck. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we grew a relatively small and modest MSP that have recently switched from break fix into a pretty big, I would say, national player now that I'm still really proud of. They're doing a really great job. And how we got there, because it honestly wasn't that we were the best or the most skilled. It's, as we just said, stumbled into a lot of situations and made the right decisions. So just who I am for anybody who doesn't know me. Most of you probably know me as Dr. Zoidberg on RMSP or Slack or Discord. I've spent over a decade as an MSP service manager and operations manager. I probably can fix a printer.
That is a bold claim, sir.
Listen, so quick side tangent. I was given a NEC black and white laser printer, the type that you had to refill the toner in with the funnel and the squeezy hopper back in the 90s. It was a parallel port, and it broke. And I took every single piece of that printer apart, every single gear, cleaned everything off because I had no idea how it worked, put it all back together, and then it started working again. So that's how I can back up my claim.
All right.
Probably.
So what I'm hearing is I did it one time, so I could probably do it again.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, a lot of MSP advice and coaches, that's their claim, is they did it once. So
that's fair. That's fair.
And I annoy a lot of vendors and MSPs. I am a psycho dog dad. I have the hat. And my day job, I'm the VP of operations at Helpt. And because I couldn't claim I'm a psycho dog dad without proving it, this is my dog, Lily. She has an Instagram with more followers than most vendors. And my retirement plan is to monetize her Instagram and not have to work anymore. So
That's hilarious.
we'll see if we ever get there. So you want me to get into it, or do you have any questions before I get started with the good stuff?
Let's get into it, man.
All right. So some of this is going to sound like fairly astroturfy advice to begin with, but you really need to focus on the goal. And kind of like an ICP, an ideal client profile, you need to be very specific. There's a culture, if you've done anything like EOS or any of those other systems, where you focus on a big lofty goal, a BHAG, and that's cool. Our BHAG was we wanted to support 10,000 users as a tiny little 6-person MSP. But that's so disconnected from reality. It's more important to focus on a much more specific goal. And where are you trying to take your MSP? So if you're listening to this now and you're relatively modest size, probably under 3 million, let's say, in total revenue, where are you trying to take this thing? Like, what are you actually envisioning here? And be pretty specific about where you're trying to take it. Because once you've done that, you can take that goal and really examine what does that business look like create the sort of the culture and the buying persona of that MSP. So, do you want to exit? What kind of exit? When? How far would your service radius be? I mean, you can get pretty tactical with this. Like, are you thinking, in our case, we were just southeastern Massachusetts. Do we want to stay within an hour of where we're located? The MSP we turned into ended up being all up and down the East Coast. And if you had asked me at this time, do I want to be going all the way down to Pennsylvania? No, I don't. That's important to know. So you got to think about and envision what the lifestyle would be like in that business. What kind of people are you going to employ? That's another thing you need to think about for whatever that goal is. So if your goal is I want to make a $25 million MSP and then sell it to a PE group, which is an awesome goal, what kind of staff are you going to have at that $25 million company? Is it the same staff you have now? Is it going to be, you're going to hire a bunch of ringers? Are you going to train up a bunch of people from the local community college? You really want to try to crystallize the vision of as specific and tactically as possible of what that MSP is going to look like. What kind of tech are you going to use? What kind of verticals are you going to be famous, legendary for in your area? What's the chart of accounts look like? Like, how complicated is it going to be? Are you going to blend some of your cost of goods sold? Like, are you going to blend cloud resale and managed services? Because you don't really care that much. Or are those all going to be separate business units? What's that org accountability chart going to look like, et cetera? And once you have that vision in your head, you've sort of drawn out your idealized MSP that's at the top of that mountain. You got to go in. This is the operations manager in me. You got to do a gap analysis, because this is the only possible way that you can start to get your arms around what you need to focus on improving now, so that when luck stumbles through your door, you'll be ready to capitalize on it. So things like an operational maturity assessment are super helpful here. I'm not saying you have to use any particular vendor's version of that, but some sort of assessment that you can run your company through and really break down where you currently are, what your deficits are, and what you would need to improve to be that future MSP as specifically and tactically as possible. And every time you go to do a hand wavy strategic thing where you're like, well, in the future, I will hire an accounts payable person and they will just handle that. You got to check yourself and step back and say, why? It's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich experiment. Go make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay, get some bread. Where do I get the bread from? Oh, get it from the store. How do I get to the store? You want to break down everything like that until you get to a stopping point. It's the only possible way you're going to be able to figure out how to improve those systems. As you go through this, hit me.
I think I'm the paralysis by analysis guy. So you say you break down the goal, but like I'm the guy that'll continue to break it down until I know like what denominations of currency I have in my wallet in order to go purchase the bread. How many 20s do I have in my wallet? How many fives? How many tens? Which one do I pay for the bread with? Like I will break this down
Right.
because I would rather continue breaking this down and have every little thing planned out than actually go out and do the work.
So that's actually really important feedback, because we're not at a point where we're creating solutions. And if going through trying to figure out this gap and set goals, if you find that you're running into a problem with that, for example, you have paralysis of analysis, then that should be a red flag to you that your goals aren't realistic. Because at the end of the day, Steve, at your MSP, you're going to have a great staff. You're going to hire more great staff later, but you're the captain at the helm. And if you can't get your head around your own goal today for whatever reason, that isn't magically going to change later because you bought a tool or hired a person. And identifying that early on, and in our MSP's case, the owner identified very early on that he just didn't have the capability or even really the competency to operationally run the place. And so he found me and put me in charge of doing that. That's really important. And that's exactly why I want people to do this gap analysis, because I want them to have that sort of self-realization moment of, well, I'm just going to keep breaking this down into smaller and smaller pieces and never move forward. Fair. That probably won't ever change. Sounds like you need an integrator.
Okay.
So as you go through all of that, the logical step that I think a lot of owners are going to arrive at, as you were just arriving, is, me, Dean, me, Steve, whoever's watching this, I may not actually be capable of growing this organically. And I say that, and my notes on the slide have a little frowny face in the comments. Sorry. Oh, I have it here too. Perfect. And I'm kind of ragging on everybody, but like, listen, there's no magic secret here. And if you've been in business for 10 years and you're just kind of peaking somewhere between 1 million and 3 million, you probably Peter principle. You probably reach the level of your own skills. And the likelihood that you are organically going to keep being able to find more clients, drive them in, and slowly expand your business, it's not great, because you probably would already be doing that at this point. So I have the slide here to point out that growing organically isn't the only way to grow. And we eventually realized that there were ways we could do this without abdicating control. Build an MSP that can either be acquired or acquire others. And especially the second point, that could acquire others. That's still organic growth. If you get to a point where your operations and your MSP are stable enough, good enough, where you could go and merge with or buy another MSP that is roughly around your size or maturity level, that's still organic growth. It's just a different kind. And that was the realization that we had. And that's what allowed us to really start moving forward past that initial plateau that we got stuck at. So, yeah, go ahead. Do you have any questions?
So it sounds like your goal for growth was not let's figure out how to deliver, not that you didn't, but let's figure out how we can deliver services and scale this to $50 million worth of services. It was, let's figure out how to build an MSP that is operationally mature enough to acquire other MSPs, and then take what we do and kind of apply it to those MSPs and then continue that growth. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. So skipping dramatic foreshadow, skipping ahead a little bit. If you think of this like any sort of relationship, whether you're good at interacting with other humans on an interpersonal level or not, if you get your act together, so you figure out what, who you are as a person, your appearance, the way you talk, the whole package, everything else becomes easier regardless of any deficits you might have in that situation. Same thing applies to business. And I had put this slide in with Fry with the glasses on to kind of point out the fact that like a lot of MSPs owners aren't very good at selling. It's just not. It's not your natural skill set. It wasn't why you started the business. You're just not very good at it. So having the approach that, well, I'm going to keep going out and just finding more clients and have this amazing funnel that's always full and just going to drive business in, that's probably not a realistic goal for 80-85% of MSP owners. But focusing on making what you currently have as efficient and as standardized as possible is absolutely within the skill set of most MSP owners. And once you do that, you realize that you've kind of created Lego blocks. And well, if Steve's MSP also has Lego blocks, well, his Lego blocks can connect to my Lego blocks. And now I have more Legos. And it's a very empowering realization when you get to that point that you realize that, hey, I might not be the best at selling to net new clients, or I might be the only one that can do it. And I don't know how to train a team, but I could go find other successful MSPs that look like me and think like me, and we could just combine forces. And now we're twice as big and we have twice as many clients and twice as many opportunities to suck at selling. That can be really powerful. And there are plenty of MSPs in the space that we know that have become powerhouses simply through merging with someone else that resembled them. So where do you even start? This idea that I want to be either able to acquire others or be acquired. And I am a firm advocate, even if you're saying, if you're watching this, you're saying, I never want to be acquired. Listen, you have no idea what could walk through that door someday. And if you go on this journey of making your MSP operationally attractive and financially attractive, you might get the offer someday. Everybody's got a number. You might get the offer. You never know. So don't totally write that off. So where do you start? You need to start in the shorter term to begin with. You really can't have these lofty, grandiose goals. We need to focus on the immediacy, the next year or two. So things that we're going to focus on: operations. We're going to focus on dialing in exactly who we sell to, exactly what our brand identity is. For a lot of MSPs, Steve and I were just talking about this before we went live. A lot of MSPs and vendors, their brand identity is everything to everybody. Can't really grow that. So you kind of got to pick, be specific. You got to really get in there. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit, but you need to go in and really align your stack and really simplify the heck out of it. And I'm sorry if you're an MSP that loves to tinker and loves technology. That probably means it's going to be a little painful for you, because you're going to need to stop using less toys and just really just pick a couple of vendors, and that's it, for better or for worse. You put a lot of effort into your delivery and process, not to have that necessarily that white glove experience, literally, waiters with white gloves and the crumb catcher over their sleeve, but more that you have a repeatable process and a repeatable delivery that is 100% or as close to that as possible, executed all the time by everybody. And you have to get your financial health and accounting shipshape. You can't have any mysterious nonsense. We'll get to that a little bit later, but as a little bit of foreshadowing, if you've done everything else on this list already, and some of you honestly have a pretty shipshape MSP. If you got any weird stuff on the books, like maybe you have a car that's a business expense and a couple of laptops that are business expense, just weird stuff like that, or you have some equipment in the building that you haven't really depreciated and tracked properly, and you might be like, who cares? No one cares. And you're not wrong. When somebody does walk in the door with that amazing offer and they dig into your books, that's going to make them go, ugh. And you don't want them to do that. You don't want to turn them away. That's back to my relationship example. You put all this effort into who you are and you forgot to wear deodorant that day. Don't do that. You don't want to do that. And a lot of good businesses leave the financial health and accounting to the end, because we're like, that's our problem. I'm the only one who has to worry. Me and my CPA, we're the only ones that care about that. Tomorrow could be the day you need to show your books to somebody. So just keep that in the back of your head. Don't leave that as the very last piece. So what worked for us really well, and what I suggest that all of you try to adopt because everyone I've seen try to adopt this has also been successful. Focus on a mentality that my T1s need to be able to do a lot, if not everything, at my MSP. I understand that won't actually be the reality of the execution, but that should be the business philosophy, that if a T1 can't do it, something is wrong, because that will cause you to think about everything we just discussed in a totally different mindset. It'll force you to think more like, and I know it's going to make some people cringe, it's going to force you to think more like a McDonald's, in that everything needs to be repeatable, standardized, and able to be delivered the same way to a really happy client every time. And when you think that way about all the areas of your business, you will also realize that I don't need very expensive people to execute all these things. So some examples of that, just kind of at a high level. If you've gone in and you've sort of said that I've got a B player T1, that's a regular T1 employee, not an A player, not the rock star kid who came in to reset passwords and has already home labbed a Veeam server and set up a pfSense firewall. I don't mean that person. The regular person you hire that comes in and works normal tickets and does a good job, that person should be able to execute probably about 80% of your service delivery and project delivery at your MSP. And if you're aligning everything else, remember, if you align your ICP and you verticalize, this is much easier, because if I only support, in our case, we did this with veterinary offices for animals. So if I only have to learn half a dozen line of business softwares, a couple of vendors, and a couple of imaging and server products, it's a lot easier for me to standardize.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have an actionable CAM process, client account management process, meaning that it's so simple and straightforward that the value is obvious and your clients actually attend it and use it. A very simple stack. We completely simplified our stack. We had like 3 or 4 different firewalls we were selling, from different vendors, and others we would support. We just ripped the Band-Aid off. In our case, we picked Sophos. I'm not endorsing Sophos. We just picked that as a brand and just standardized every client over a 2-year period on Sophos. And then from that point forward, any new client had to have a Sophos. And sure, does that make selling a little harder? It does, but it makes supporting everything a lot easier. If every single client's got this little white box, it's exactly the same. And we became a highly process-driven organization. Everything had a process. There was an SOP on how to do everything. The reality was the SOP wasn't always followed to the letter because I had people working for me, and people aren't robots. But the process was always there to refer back to. There was always a way to do something. And if that process wasn't documented, whoever raised their hand and said there's no process became the captain of getting that process documented. And those things combined really made it so that very entry-level people could join our organization, be highly successful, have a really good experience. Almost everybody stayed on. When I get to our actually, I don't know if I have a slide on this. So when we had a couple of pretty big mergers, my staff all stayed on. They loved it because, they were all these folks that had been empowered to be successful in their career rather than trying to hire, seasoned people that already had their own opinions on how things work.
And I want to piggyback off of this. I want to say that it doesn't matter what size you are. And I'm especially talking to the little guys, maybe the MSP that's doing around 100,000 a year. There's just one of you. You haven't brought on employees yet. The best thing you can do, and this is going to sound like buzzwords that corporations use when they don't know what they're talking about. You need to work on finding operational efficiencies that you can implement to improve your service delivery and margins. And if what I just said to you sounds like gibberish, then maybe you need to rethink running an MSP, because these are the types of statements that you need to be comfortable hearing and saying in order to scale a business to make real money. And when I say real money, I want to clarify. There was a good conversation the other day on, I don't know, Slack or Reddit or somewhere, where I kind of agreed with a couple of the people where we said I would rather take a $1 million business with 25 or 30% profit margin over a $5 million business with a 10% profit margin, because the healthier business is going to be easier to run because it's probably more efficient. Not to say that you won't, be able to fix the $5 million business, but you should have fixed it at 1 million before you got to 5 million. There are things that you should be doing that.
Yeah. And it's like a staircase. So you'll get to a level of maturity where you're aligned with your clients and you've just done what Steve said. And then you'll say, hey, I want to go up market. And then you'll have all the same problems again at a more sophisticated scale.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have that continual improvement. Like Steve is just saying, like that, you keep looking for how to be the best at where I currently am. And when you do that, by the way, something Steve said about how he would pick one MSP over the other thing to keep in mind, if you're delivering things efficiently and properly, where you're happy and you're satisfied and your team is happy and satisfied, your clients can tell that. And those soft factors will transmit through to your clients. And generally speaking, your clients will also be stickier and more happy and satisfied because you're happy. Nobody wants to work with a provider where everybody sounds miserable, whether that's literally or figuratively. And your clients aren't dumb. They can tell. And somebody coming in who's looking to merge or buy you, if they interview your clients, they will pick up on that. So even if you are teeny tiny and you think no one would ever want to buy my business, well, maybe you're right. Maybe you're just going to sell off your book of business someday. But whoever's buying that, if they meet with your clients and your clients can just tell that you have genuine joy from running your business because you're not ripping your hair out, those are stickier clients. So it's important. Like perfect segue. It's like you saw my slide deck ahead of time. As you hit these maturity levels, you're going to get to various points along your growth journey where you will kind of plateau and things will become easier. Your ease of selling will increase. If I standardize, if that like $100,000 to $1 million MSP banding with, let's say, less than 10 employees, if I've standardized what I'm doing at that point and I've gotten really good at selling to, 5 to 20 seat dental offices in the greater Boston area, like you dialed in, you're just swimming in clients, you can get to a point where you're like, I've got it. Our business is running. We know what to do. Selling is becoming easy. I'm getting 2 or 3 qualified appointments, like sit downs a month, more business than I can handle. And so most of us are naturally going to want to back off the operational focus. This is a trap, right? Strong sales hide a lot of operational inefficiencies because, quite frankly, you don't have to fix something if I constantly have new revenue coming in to replace bad revenue. That's fine if you're running a lifestyle business and you're happy where you are and this is good enough. Like, then good job. But if the goal here is still to grow towards a bigger valuation, then this is a trap. And you want to be careful you don't fall into this mindset. So ease of selling into increasingly more refined ICPs will allow you to start going up market. And it will allow you to branch into other revenue streams or distinct business units. And that means that your business will become more complicated. And if you've stagnated at the operational maturity we've just talked about, if you just sort of stopped improving, then this is all going to catch up to you and you are going to hit your ceiling and that's it for you. So a failure, the thing that we found, and if you knew me at the time of our last big merger, something I kind of complained about at the time was like, hey, like our new overlords don't care as much about operational efficiency as I do. This kind of sucks. They have really strong sales. And it took them a while to kind of catch up to that. It took them like 2 years to kind of like circle back and realize that, oh crap, we let our operational efficiency languish and they had to work really hard to make up for those 2 years. Don't do that to yourself. That's why I have Zach Brannigan here, because Zach Brannigan never, ever plans ahead for anything. So I think it's also important to mention the power of peer accountability. It's going to change as you grow, but getting involved with a peer accountability group of some kind is super helpful at each level of maturity. I do want to say that you have a finite amount of revenue dollars to spend in these groups because you want a moderated group. These groups do cost money. So I am not advocating that you just hemorrhage revenue dollars into a peer group because it's going to solve all your problems. You need to be able to afford both the time and the cash to be there. But if you can, these are really good. And you want to audit yourself and make sure that the peer group you're in and the community you've joined, I listed a few as examples here, but the community that you've joined is aligned with the maturity level that you're currently trying to hit. And we found, I was originally in a peer group. I was a Taylor Business Group, actually, as a service management group initially back in like 2014. And I got to a point in the group where me as an individual and our MSP had really grown beyond the maturity level of the group we were in. And it was important that we realized that and kind of raised our hand and stepped back and looked for a group that was now more aligned to where our business was, rather than just staying there and hanging out with what were now basically my drinking buddies. So I think peer groups are very important to help you along this journey, but that is an important caveat. Now, Steve, have you had any peer group experience at all?
Yeah, I actually ran one for a little while, and you're right. Like, it starts off where we're getting a lot done, and then it kind of devolves into becoming drinking buddies. However, the one thing I want to throw out there is when you've got drinking buddies, now you've built such a relationship that when you do have something going on, you're really comfortable peeling back the curtain and saying, "Hey guys, I have this problem. I've screwed this up. Um, Help me put it back together and maybe make it better." And the advice you're going to get from these people is going to be so genuine because they care. You've all built an actual friendship and camaraderie that they want to help you succeed. Whereas, some of these other peer groups, they almost feel like a little stiff. Not that that's a bad thing, but they're just like, so they've got their way of doing things, and maybe they only meet once a quarter or whatever, right? So it's hard to build that camaraderie, which means you're maybe going to be a little more shy. You're not going to be as willing to talk about what's really going on in your business because you're afraid they're going to judge you. Whereas with your friends, your drinking buddies, you're less worried that they're going to judge you because they already know your dirty secrets anyway.
Right. Well, and once again, because I got to keep hammering home Futurama here, I picked this GIF because, if you watch the show, Zoidberg's technically one of the smartest characters on the show, but he stinks, and no one ever tells him that. And Fry's his friend, so Fry is giving him actual honest feedback here. And that's an important element if you do join a peer group. It needs to have accountability metrics that everybody in the group are actually participating in, or you'll have the exact situation Steve just described, where you're going to be uncomfortable sharing what's going on at your MSP because no one else is really being honest about what's going on at their MSP. And since I know that some folks are kind of afraid of the ecosystem peer groups like Evolve or True Peer, which are great groups, but I get it if you don't want to go to one that's paid for by one of the big sponsors. There are still plenty of unaffiliated non-ecosystem peer groups. I listed a couple examples here. There's probably like 20 more that just didn't come to mind when I was making the slide. So a couple of so you butt into everything I've said. You're like, all right, sold. I'm going to standardize. I'm going to make it so, everything in my MSP can be done by a level 1. I'm going to focus on exactly who I'm selling to. I'm going to get my finances in order. I'm going to clean up. I'm going to take a MSP shower, put on deodorant, and wear clean MSP clothes. Got it. There's some cool stuff that kind of ends up happening that maybe you weren't planning for, but are now open and available to you. And since I know a lot of you are owners and therefore visionaries that like to chase the revenue, I figured some of these would be fun to talk about for a second. So probably the thing that was the coolest scaling factor for us, one of the MSPs we merged with they already had a really robust HOS and leasing program going. We were doing HOS for projects, but they were doing HOS and leasing for everything. And because our MSP was very operationally mature, their MSP was very operationally mature in a very similar way, we were able to plug and play their HOS and leasing system right into our client base. And it was amazing. And without like revealing too much stuff, we got to a point, and I am, by the way, I'm not advocating anybody here. If you're starting off hossing and leasing, do not be the bank. Go find a leasing partner until you're big enough. We were big enough at that point where we did become the bank, and you'd have like a 5-year agreement where the equipment was paid for in the first like 13 months. And then we were just charging 30% interest on our own money for the next 4 years. That's super cool. We wouldn't have been able to do that without really aggravating our clients and our sales department if we hadn't put all this effort into standardization. It allows you also, when you standardize, especially if you've picked a particular type of client, you can go to verticalized trade shows. And what's super important about that is no one is doing that. Like, no one in our space seems to have their act together enough to be doing this. So there's a good chance that you will be the MSP in your area that is showing up to verticalized trade shows. What I mean by that is, if in our case it was, veterinary clinics, we go to their events and we exhibit at their events and we speak on things that are important to their industry. And I mean, like, really, really astroturfy level stuff. Like, I could get up on a stage and be like, you should have MFA. And everyone in the house like, wow, never heard of this before. Smartest guy in the room. Stuff that as an MSP, we would normally laugh at each other about. Like, of course we need MFA, Steve. Like, that's, no one would even attend that webinar in this channel. But in these verticalized events, basic common sense in IT, if you understand their vertical, they are pleased to have you on stage. And that builds amazing referral networks, because people within a business community really like to feel smart and validated. They like the feeling that they made the right choice selecting your MSP. They're very happy to tell other people about that, especially in public, because it makes them feel even more validated. Another thing standardization can let you do is, I have yet to meet an MSP business owner that hasn't at least waxed poetic to me about this over a drink, is the idea of having, subject matter expert tactical teams. I want a networking team. I want a compliance team. Well, hey, that's actually viable if you standardize to this point, because you have such a good idea of what your costs are and your agreement efficiencies in your top funnel that you can actually afford to do that. You can start taking some of your process documents, because they're so well followed, and just make them client facing. And when you make KBs client facing, that opens up the world of ticket deflection, which means you now start getting to act like a Fortune 5000 company, where your end users don't actually ever need to talk to you to get support, because they go to your knowledge base first, and generally speaking are happy to do it. That's a really, really cool thing. It takes a lot of pressure off your team having to pick up the phone, as an example. All that stuff that we talk about all the time, like we're doing automation and AI, but like a lot of us really aren't meaningfully doing. We just, you buy Synchro, you just get the scripts it comes with. Is that automation or not? Well, you've gotten to a point now where all your clients interact with you the same way. All your staff service everything the same way. Every box is set up the same way at every client. Now you actually can actually automate stuff. And you can dedicate a resource or a team to actually automating stuff in a meaningful, repeatable way that doesn't require a level 3 wizard to babysit the script library on a weekly basis. That whole world is open to you now. And most importantly, because you've done all these things, you have set a standard and you can sell against it. And that is a super empowering thing to be able to do. The example I give to everybody, Steve, how big is a large fry?
I don't know.
You have a rough idea in your head of how big of a large fry would be, right?
Yeah.
If I gave you something that was significantly less or significantly bigger than that, you would notice, right?
Yes.
even though there is no universal fast food large fry standard, the industry has set a standard. And so some people sell against it. And you can do that same thing with yourself. You can come in and say, this is our standard offering. It's only one offering, no precious metals, no good, better, best, just our best offering at this price. However, for some clients, we offer these extra amazing add-ons. And you can sell, instead of having it as an add-on that bolts onto your offering, you sell against your own offering about why your own offering of a large fry actually isn't what they want. And they want the Five Guys experience where you're going to dump all the extra fries in the bag because it's bigger than a large fry. You can do that now against yourself. And that's a very, very powerful sales tool as you started to move up market. Because at that point, the decision makers and your clients probably aren't another small business owner. There's probably a team now that has that decision making problem, maybe an internal IT guy, maybe a CISO or a CTO or something. And you no longer have to risk bringing on a competitor as a comparison point. You're your own comparison point. You're your own competitor. Do you want it's kind of what you see now with McDonald's with to keep that fast food thing going with the any size drink is whatever it is, like $1.99 now for any size drink. They're literally selling against their own standard because they know that they can deliver that soda so affordably that it doesn't matter what size you buy. You'll buy other stuff because of it. You can do that as well.
You remember when hash browns used to be $1?
I do.
And now they're like $2.49 for a hash brown.
It's sad times, Steve. And I used to be a Burger King man, and they've really driven my business away. And I'm very sad about all of that. And I saw near me recently the local McDonald's was offering up to $18 an hour, and that also made me sad because I would love to see what the price increase that they were offering a better standard wage as opposed to an up to wage. But that's a different talk. We could talk about how we're already living in the dystopian future that our sci-fi warned us about. That should be another show, and we'll make it all around. We'll make it all around hash browns. So if you're at MSP GeekCon, I did a talk on this concept, but it's important that throughout the journey, you keep focus on what you're good at. And I'm kind of leading up to another slide in a minute because everything I just described, it's a lot. And if you're still at that point, we were at sub $1 million, you're just not going to be able to do all of this yourself or even be able to hire the team. You might luck into finding somebody like the owner of our company that's like me who can do some of it, but you're probably not going to find 3 or 4 people that together at that size can do it all. So you have to identify what you are actually good at. And it's not going to be everything, right? And as a business owner, you wear many hats because someone has to. You need to take a more critical look at both from an individual standpoint, but also the business, if the business was a person, at how many hats are being worn. And are there any here that I really genuinely need to stop wearing because I'm hurting the business? And from a focusing standpoint, that's going to mean that you need to have a wake up moment that you can't be everything to everybody. And so at our MSP, we had dreams of doing cabling and physical security as a service. And I think we got to maybe about like 950,000 a year, like just shy of $1 million. And I remember I went into the office of the owner, Nate, and I was like, Nate, we can't do this. We can't make any money doing this. We don't know what we're doing. We can't do cabling. I want to, but we can't. We got to hire somebody. We got to find a contractor. And it's that you have to have that awakening that, hey, not every area of revenue I could potentially capture is revenue I should be bothering trying to capture directly right now, or you just won't grow. It just won't happen at all. So for us, and what I suggest to a lot of people, the answer to that is to be comfortable with outsourcing. And I work for an outsourcing vendor. This slide is not to try and push you to that. The point is there is outsourcing at a tactical and strategic level for almost every area of your business. And you're going to have different ways that you engage with and use different outsourcing vendors. And that's completely appropriate and pretty useful to you. So as an example, And the very first thing we outsourced was actually finance. We realized that while we were capable of handling AR and of course AP and general bookkeeping, it just, we were chasing it too much. It wasn't organized enough. Just, it was sloppy. So we brought on an outside firm initially just to do our bookkeeping, and then that was okay. And then we ended up outsourcing the entire sort of thought process and management of that department to an individual who just celebrated her 10th year anniversary doing this. Doreen Gem, she's a good person. But it was really smart because that now took that entire business unit for a fee and offloaded it to someone else. The literal same value proposition you MSPs have when you're selling to clients about they shouldn't have to worry about their IT anymore. So, offload it to me. Let's share the risk. It's exactly the same value proposition you're going to have with every category of your business. So with finance, we had like a ramp up until we had them fully engaged, and then everything was organized enough and we had gained enough revenue where we were then able to hire a full-time bookkeeper. And so we ramped down. And so that was tactical outsourcing. It wasn't forever. It was, we had a goal in mind to be able to get this to a point where we could hire someone to take it over. And we did. Dispatch and call answering were another one that I think, especially if you're struggling at that size, your clients want to be able to call and they want a prompt response. Most clients are pretty accepting of a slower resolution, but they want to be heard. And if you're a smaller MSP, the only way to solve that's with bodies, and you don't have a lot of them, and they need to be doing other stuff. So we engaged with a call answering service that anytime our team couldn't pick up the phone, it would spill over to them. And we went full hog into that. And then once again, we got to a point where we had enough team members in a process. We brought in an in-house dispatcher, and we're able to then, through ticket deflection, offload that entirely to that dispatcher, and we ramped down off that service. That's another tactical one. For knock and sock, we realized right away this is never going to be our core focus. And until we had our last big merger, this was a full thing we outsourced. We just found a trusted partner and just outsourced that. I used at our MSP, I used IT by Design. I had a great experience with them. Their knock team especially, it's fantastic if you're looking for a knock. We went full into that. We never ramped down from that until our combined entities as a company. We had like 300 FTEs. We were literally big enough to just do that ourselves. But it was never because we had that like planned process. We weren't planning to do it. We just stumbled into that. We were very careful about 24/7 services. There's this perception that you need to offer 24/7 services to get better clients. And this is largely not true. Most SMBs do not need 24/7 services. So sure, we had a 24/7 knock, but we never really got into a position where we genuinely needed to offer 24/7 help desk or ticketing until we got so big that our clients had grown to also be follow the sun. And then once again, at that point, I had people in-house that lived in every time zone. So that wasn't an issue. So in my case, we never really leaned into that. And then stuff like cabling and physical security and stuff like that, we always found a partner for that, a contractor. We never did that in-house. And I think unless you're fully owning 100% of the management of these services, you too should find a partner and outsource them. And then my most favorite one for the smaller MSP who is just getting into hiring employees, managing the administrative tasks and costs around HR, payroll, benefits. Can you do that at $250,000? Yes, of course you can do that. You're a smart person. It takes a lot of time and effort. It's a huge time suck where you're not selling, you're not delivering things. If you can find a PEO that you like, besides taking that all off your plate, it'll allow you to offer benefits to compete with bigger companies. So we ramped into that. Then we went full into PEO. And even when we were big, we still were working with the PEO. And even to the point when we had an actual HR department with multiple team members, because that's how big our MSP was, we still were working with the PEO. And that was awesome. And I highly recommend that to anybody. There's a lot of them. But that's definitely a cost center you do not need to be spending your own time and mental energy in. I got 2 more slides. You got any questions, Steve? I talked for a long time.
No, this is awesome, man. Keep going.
So I kind of alluded to it earlier, but the entire time you really want to always have this idea that at any point in your growth, whether this is your first year as an MSP, your 20th year, that you want to try to always make your MSP attractive. And to kind of make the joke, like you want an investor to swipe right. And or to think of it a different way, you don't want to be, if I'm at the MSP bar and I want to take someone home, you don't want to be the last person left when the lights turn on at last call in the bar. No one wants to be in that position. You want to have options. So at all times, you just always want to be thinking about, no matter where I am in my growth cycle, in my maturity stage, am I taking steps, mostly soft factor steps, to make sure I'm as attractive as I could be? Because you just never know. You never know what kind of offer could walk in that door. And if you think of it like buying a house, right? Like if there's multiple bids on a house, the bid that is both financially the most attractive, but also has the most compelling cover letter attached to it, with the most compelling story, the whole package, you're more likely to win that bid on that house than someone else. The same logic applies here to your MSP. So some more soft factor things to think about that'll make you attractive, both to being acquired or to someone else merging in with you. You can have evidence that you've had low churn on internal staff. And generally speaking, if your company is a good place to work and people want to work for you, and I don't mean loyalty, loyalty is good, but loyalty isn't transitive. I mean, genuinely, it's a good place to work. People want to be there. That usually will transmit through to all the other areas of your business and will be visible to a buyer or an acquisition partner. And some things you can use to show some evidence that that's not just because of pizza parties and ping pong tables. Good CSAT, especially good CSAT response rate. The scoring doesn't matter as much as the response rate, because if I'm 5 stars but only 2 people have filled it out, that's not as important as if I'm 4.1 stars but 700 people have filled it out. So good engagement on your CSAT from your team, some sort of evidence that your team is working towards professional development, earning certifications, things like that. I'm not saying you need to be a certification mill, but just some way to demonstrate to an acquisition partner that you value professional development and can prove that your staff also value it. And just in general, whatever your policies are, good ticket hygiene. So if your policies say that that all their notes have to be internal notes, then if I look in your ticketing system, I'd like to see that's the case. If your policy says that they need to always put next steps or resolution step, then I'd want to be able to look at that and see that they're doing that. That whatever your hygiene standards are, they could be low. They don't have to be, big standards, that you're meeting them. An important one that I think gets ignored a lot for smaller MSPs, you need to have solid agreements. There's a big cultural push with smaller MSPs that they think that month to month is a value add, both when they're buying from a vendor, but also when they're selling to clients. And a lot of this is basically competing on price and not really understanding what they're selling. I get it. Selling a month-to-month contract with no obligation is easier. It makes you feel better as the MSP owner. It's not a very attractive agreement setup for an acquisition partner, whether you're being acquired or merging with someone else. Because what you're basically communicating is that the relationship is tied directly between the clients and the people who work for you. And there's no piece of paper to really protect that. So keep that in mind. Having agreements that are assignable is a huge thing to making your MSP more attractive. If I'm buying you and I don't immediately have to go out and make all your clients sign a new piece of paper, boy, does that make it less scary, because that means I'm not going to lose out on all that revenue in the first, 6 months, a year, 2 years. So having assignable agreements, very, very attractive. And just in general, terms that, without being draconian, terms that protect the investment in the agreement. Some MSPs will say they don't define an exit clause at all. And once again, it's kind of like the month-to-month thing. I get why you say that. It's easier to sell that, but it also tells somebody that might be purchasing you or being purchased by you that you don't have a lot of ways to protect that investment. And have a scope of work that isn't in your invoice or your MSA, so that somebody else can see that you're proud of and know exactly what it is you offer. Evidence that you've curated your clients. So if you've had verticalized success, just some way to show that to an acquisition partner, that makes you a lot more attractive. Generally speaking, if I go and survey your team and your team can't really think of too many clients that are PITA clients, pain in the ass clients, that's another thing. That's a good general marker that your clients are loyal, sticky, and aligned to your business. And if you have some sort of evidence of efficiency tracking with your clients, I don't mean it has to be good, just that you've been doing it. If you could show me that you're paying attention to this, that it matters to you, that you're working towards growth, these are all little soft factors that make you a little more attractive. A highly aligned tech stack, so the same box is set up the same way everywhere. That is a super powerful one. If you're merging with somebody else, be able to say, hey, this APC UPS is set up with the same alerting on every site everywhere, no matter who it's for. A solid account management process, and specifically evidence that QBRs actually get attended. And that evidence could be that you're proposing solutions that the clients are rejecting. That's fine. I'm not saying you're a sales master and you need to be like getting everybody to agree to DLP at every account meeting. But if you have an evidence trail that you've presented, for example, a DLP solution, and the client has said, no, thank you, that's important because it shows me that you've taught your clients there's a value in regular meetings with you and that you're constantly trying to align their business needs. Those things, once again, make you more attractive. And my favorite one, because no one does this, legendary onboardings. Become famous in your market for the quality of your onboardings, to the point where other MSPs that are losing from you will basically say, holy crap, this MSP is so good at onboarding, I wish I was them. We could do a whole separate video on this. No one puts any time and attention into this. You can make that onboarding experience so famously extraordinary. That'll tell an acquisition partner that you understand that the sale doesn't end the minute the contract is signed, and that you understand the long-term valuation of the agreements that you're putting clients on. That is super attractive to an acquisition partner. That's it. Thanks.
All right. So many directions I could take some questions now. But we don't really have a lot of time. So with that, I have one question that I want to try and get through. How do we successfully integrate an acquired company's operations, clients, and employees?
So, like, how do you go find them, or how do you make that successful once you found them?
You've acquired a company. How do you successfully integrate their company into yours?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest thing, in the short amount of time we have, the biggest thing you need to be able to do is communicate to your entire team, and by extension, their entire team, that everyone here is winning, and not as much as you can. There's going to be NDAs and things, but as much as you can, you need to keep your whole team involved in the process, because the more you get your entire team engaged on both sides, that this is a win for everybody. And your staff aren't stupid. Don't lie to them and be like, because we're merging, we're going to be 5x more profitable. Like, what does that mean for me as an employee? It doesn't mean anything. You need to connect it back to their actual lives in a meaningful, tangible way. The more you can do that, the more your staff will just be on board with the idea, which means all the small little balls that you don't know are going to get dropped, your staff will catch some of them, and they'll make that integration a little bit smoother because they feel like they have skin in the game. An easy way to do that, if you are merging with someone else, is find a way, when you're doing your meetings about, who's getting paid and what they're getting paid, is try to figure out some sort of retention bonus. It's cash that you could give to the staff, and don't dangle it too far out in the future. So like 6 months or less, where, if anybody stays on after the acquisition, because acquisitions are scary, you're going to get this sizable chunk of cash, something like that. Something that really lets both teams know that this was for them as well, and that you give a shit. That's super, super important. Your team will catch a lot of those balls that you don't know are being dropped if you keep them engaged in the acquisition.
And you don't necessarily have to do that for everyone on the team, maybe just key people.
We did it for everybody.
And when you say sizable amount of cash, I mean, what kind of, obviously it's different for every MSP, but like what kind of amount are we talking here, ballpark?
So the last big merger we did where this happened, I don't know, it wasn't a crazy valuation. They probably like 8 or 9x EBITDA. But I would say not everybody got the same amount, but like people were getting, over $1,000.
Okay.
Now I don't expect, if this is happening to you at a smaller size, if you're $1.5 million MSP or an $800,000 MSP that's merging with a bigger MSP, you probably don't have that cash on hand to just hand out. So the number could be smaller. Just don't make it so small. The thing with free money is if you give employees free money, but it's not the right amount of free money, they're going to hold the free money against you, and you might as well not have given them any free money. So you just want to make sure it's not taken as an insulting token. And if you've kept them in the loop about the whole process, people aren't dumb. They understand math, and they might have a pretty decent idea of, hey, like here's a pool we allocated to distribute retention bonuses from based on revenue. And here's the numbers we used. Here's the math if you care. And here's how to work out what your number is. Staff do appreciate that level of respect and transparency.
That's really cool. Well, Dean, thank you so much. If you joined late, you can watch the recording from the beginning using the same link that you used to get here to begin with. So thank you so much, Dean. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And we will catch you guys at the next MSP Tutor.
I'll be there. I'll be watching, Steve.